Good afternoon and welcome to Saturday Session. My name is Trey Rickley. I'm the founder and director of Academy of Cannabis Science, and so glad to welcome you back today. This is what we do the first Saturday, almost always the first Saturday of the month, and we welcome professionals from the industry to come in and talk about cannabis. What's it like to work in the space? What are some things that you should know? What are some lessons learned? How can you follow other people's good steps and learn from those missteps, because we all have them and those are learning opportunities. Today, we are very happy to welcome Wendy Hull and Max Goldman from Fairwinds Manufacturing, an organization that's been around since 2014, I believe, and has been dedicated to patients since day one. Some of our licensees in Washington State have dipped their toe in and participated from time to time. Others are newer to the space, but just a very small handful have been licensees who have been approved by the Department of Health, who go through additional rigorous safety testing to make sure their products are safe enough and are top shelf for all of our patients, some of whom are immune compromised and really can't afford to ever take a risk with pesticides, etc. So glad for you all to join us today, and welcome to Saturday Sesh. I think it's your first.
It is, yeah. And thank you for the invite. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now, I gave the introduction to Fairwinds just briefly, but I'm going to ask you each if you don't mind introducing yourself. And Wendy, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. My name is Wendy Hull. I'm the founder of Fairwinds. I really applied for the application in 2013 was when we put our name in the hat for the lottery in Washington State. And before that, my previous life, I worked for the federal government for 26 years. I thought I would die with the government. That's where I would retire. Never thought I would get into the cannabis space. It wasn't really my background. But I was definitely intrigued by cannabis because I knew how much it had helped people. And when we had this opportunity in Washington State, I really wanted to and felt like we could help with the foundation of the cannabis industry, and really wanted to legitimize it as a legitimate industry, and really felt that we could do that. I thought that I knew if we got the right team together that we could add a lot of credibility. And it was really our passion from the very beginning, kind of like what Trey said. Never when we started Fairwinds did we ever think that we were going to get more into the rec side. Our passion was to help people, and we really wanted to create products that would be effective for people, and that we could reach people who didn't normally consume cannabis. And so that was the passion. In fact, when everybody else was kind of going right, selling flower, we decided we wanted to go left and create a niche for ourselves. And back then, excuse me, people weren't producing necessarily the types of products that we were producing, which we'll speak to. And I really think that helped us, at an early phase of the industry, not only get into the doors, but help kind of legitimize the products and reach a consumer base that, you might not have the opportunity to do so.
Absolutely. And yeah, early days, a lot of people were just thinking flower, right? And so I do absolutely want to come back to that, because there's a whole education process that has to go along with helping people understand what is a tincture, and how, understanding this is grandma medicine. This has been around a long time. It's not new. It's proven. And so, would love to circle back to that. I'm going to ask Max if you don't mind introducing yourself as well.
Sure. Yeah. So I've studied herbal medicine for over 25 years. I have a degree in chemistry from Roosevelt University. I've also spent over 2 years in the Himalayan mountains in a Buddhist ashram studying Ayurvedic medicine and a little Tibetan medicine, and Buddhist philosophy, psychology. And then I met Wendy and started working with her and the team in 2014, day one. And I have a lot of passion for integrating all of that holistic herbal medicine knowledge, ancient wisdom, with modern science, modern chemistry, pharmacology, and making really amazing cannabis products. I love cannabis. I've been involved with cannabis since the medical days. I was making vapes when no one else was making vapes. When it was just an e-cigarette, it was a totally new concept. I was already playing with that. So I've been, sort of in it from the ground up, and it's and I love what we do. I love what Fairwinds is able to do with really integrating the ancient wisdom of holistic medicine. What's really interesting that comes to mind about that is that the cannabis plant has been used as medicine for many years, thousands of years, and the way that it was used so long ago is different than the way that we use it today. They did use it recreational also, but it was more of a holistic integration, more like a catalyst. And we can talk all about the details and how we've integrated that with our products. But I'm really passionate about that, the integration of holistic ancient wisdom with the modern pharmacology side, the modern medicine side, to make something new, actually.
Excellent. And I was going to ask you more about the ashram. One question that comes to mind is, we were burdened with propaganda and misinformation from the drug war. How different was the mindset of the people you were surrounded by about the use of cannabis, the real meaningful, proven use of cannabis? How different was the worldview around the plant?
In the small community that I was in, it was very different because I was living with these Buddhists. They were all wearing robes. They were like monks, and they lived by their own rules, you could say. It was sort of their own world. And in that little world, cannabis is it's a sacrament. It's a sacred medicine. There was also the awareness that the society around us, was not that way and more westernized in a way. The whole world has been, I guess you could say, indoctrinated into those false ideas about cannabis. And that's really influenced from America going back, 50 plus years, 100 years. So in the general society in India, cannabis it depends where you are. I would say a majority of people see it as a drug, a bad thing. If you get out into some of the rural country areas, people use it to relax, and it's more expected that the farmers are doing that. That's their thing. They've always done that. But that's a little different from how we used it. The people I was with, it was there was a whole ritual around it. It was not recreational at all. It was strictly spiritual. It was for the purpose of expanding your consciousness. So they would take the cannabis flower, process it in a particular way, using mantras and sort of like alchemical techniques where they're mixing like a little bit of alcohol with it to soften it, a little bit of essential oils like sandalwood or peppermint, some other kind of obscure ingredients that are specific to India. And then that would go into a clay straight pipe called a chillum. And it was used as a part of a meditation ritual. So no one there was ever allowed to just smoke when they felt like it for fun. It was 2 times a day during those meditation ceremonies.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I had to follow up with that part of your introduction.
Sure.
Wendy, I want to ask you a little bit. Fairwinds has a wide variety of products. Could you talk to us a little bit about what you started with and how your offering became so wide ranged?
Yeah, I mean, right now, I think we're sitting at like 166 SKUs, but that also includes flower, and we've since expanded to also a recreational line, which is called Passion Flower. But when we first started, it was really interesting because we knew we wanted to produce very medical solution-based products. And that's what I would say is the foundation of kind of the premise behind Fairwinds is we wanted to really target very specific ailments. And luckily we met Max very early on, who had moved here to Vancouver. We're located in Vancouver, Washington. Really sight unseen, he came from Colorado. And so I don't know, the stars aligned, and with Max's background, we talked about the vision for Fairwinds, what we wanted to produce. We started out with, I think, one of our first products. It was a tincture, but it was kind of funny because the way that came about is one of our contacts from a retail store in Bellevue called us, and it was Novel Tree. And Allie said, are you guys going to produce tinctures? And at the time, this was probably really early 2015. At the time, I said, yeah, we are. And then I was talking to Max, like, okay, let's talk more about tinctures and what they are, and how effective they are. So those were some of the first products that we came out with.
I think at the time everyone was doing glycerin tinctures, and so we came out with an MCT oil-based tincture, and that was unique to the market, I think.
Yeah, that's right. We were the first one to come out with MCT oil tinctures. At the time, there weren't really any tinctures on the market, but I think there might have been one other, and it was glycerin. Yeah. But so we quickly came out with capsules, tinctures, and I think our very first tincture that we came out with was just a natural cannabis-based flavor. And at the time, I mean, it's interesting to see how the industry has changed so much, how it's evolved over the years. I mean, 2014, 15, nobody was talking about terpenes really, and now you hear people talk about terpenes and how it's the efficacy of it. You hear it all the time. But at the time, people were coming out with different flavors. It was more of a kind of a elementary, like I think we had like a mulberry tincture. It was different citrus, and so we've evolved since then. But we came out with capsules as well. We had one of our initial products that we offered was a product called Deep Sleep, which really became a very popular tincture that we had. Also, we produced a product called Companion, and that was a very effective product. So we really we're targeting very specific elements. Since then, we have developed a product called Digestify for digestion. A lot of people use it for Crohn's. And it was actually interesting because we are in such a medical space, and the way that the rules are written is that we are not allowed to speak to cannabis really having any medical benefits to it. And it's something that we've really had to fight in legislation to even be able to call our products what they are, like Deep Sleep. At one point they said to us, why can't you just call that product an indica product? And so it's been interesting to see the evolution of the industry and some of the battles that we've had to go through to produce products where people know what kind of product that they're taking and to be able to speak to it.
No, I think I'm glad you called out Deep Sleep, because I recognize it's a challenge for licensees to try to teach people about cannabinoid ratios, terpenes, what possible effects it might have without crossing that line of promising medical results, right? So you're kind of caught there. But when you all started doing Deep Sleep, I was like, oh, that's so smart to kind of follow some other examples outside of cannabis to say, hey, the name of the brand kind of leads you, or the name of the product leads you there. And since then, we've seen some other people do that, but I think it makes so much sense because we know consumers are not necessarily all going to take the time to learn about specific terpenes, ratios, etc. So it was just a smart move. I do want to go back to Max. You mentioned MCT oil. For the uninitiated, could you help us understand what MCT oil is?
Sure. MCT stands for medium chain triglyceride. Triglycerides are the main type of fat. Pretty much all oils are mostly triglycerides. And medium chain refers to the length of the carbon. A triglyceride molecule is 3 carbon chains, essentially, attached to a backbone. And medium chain refers to the length of those carbon chains. So most triglycerides, like from vegetable oils, soybean oil, that kind of thing, long chain triglycerides. And then short chain triglycerides are more rare. You don't see those a whole lot. But medium chain triglycerides, physically, they're about the same like a liquid oil, but they have different properties because of the way they're metabolized and the way they affect your body. So a lot of people will use MCT for like bulletproof coffee and other kind of health supplements like that. There's some evidence that MCT oil will help you lose weight. Even though it's a fat, it will actually help you lose fat. There's some evidence that it will absorb directly into your brain without being metabolized first, and then it can be used by your brain as fuel, sort of like how it uses glucose. So for people who are on keto and they want to keep their blood sugar low, MCT oil can be really helpful for supplementing. So it's an interesting substance. It's also a great solvent and an oil base for cannabis.
Thank you. And those students who have been in our classes or are well into the coursework understand that cannabinoids are lipophilic, so they're going to bind to oils. So this makes a lot of sense. And what we're talking about MCT oil is like, it's a version, correct me if I'm wrong, Max, but it's a version of your standard coconut oil. But coconut oil sets up solid at room temperature, where MCT oil continues to be liquid oil.
Yeah, that's right. It's the melting point is much lower for MCT oil. It's like freezing temperature basically. But normal coconut oil that you buy at the store is usually around 10% MCT oil. So all of the MCT oil you buy that's pure, they've distilled it out of regular coconut oil.
Great. So those of you who are making capsules at home, I know when we have had some of our cooking classes, if you all have been participating in those, we'll talk about sometimes we encapsulate into unrefined organic coconut oil, but MCT oil is taking it to a step, kind of another step up. It might be a little bit more expensive, but you just heard some of the reasons you might want to consider it. So, Wendy, let me ask you, Fairwinds has long been only like 3 or 4 brands in the state of Washington who participate in what they call the medical cannabis program through the Department of Health. And that means you have to go through, as you know, additional pesticide testing at very small lots. You run the risk if something is considered not meeting a standard of having to destroy the crop. Why go through the trouble? Because I know a lot of licensees are like, hey, we're just not going to take that risk, and we're going to let patients medicate off of a recreational standard product.
Yeah, from the time that we designed and built out Fairwinds, we did it knowing that we were going to be producing medical products. And one of the things that was very important for us is to make sure that we had analytics on every one of our crops. And we still do. We've actually developed another company called Dataponics that monitors every aspect of our grow room. And so consistency was very important to us. We figured that one day we would be competing against pharmaceutical companies. If people are using this truly as medicine, we knew that there had to be specific standards in play. We wanted to make sure that the experience that somebody was getting from buying one of our products was repeatable. So just kind of like as you go into, some chain stores, every time that you go into I hate using this analogy, but it's the one that's popping into my head. Every time you go into a McDonald's, you know exactly what you're going to get, regardless of what state you're in. It's very consistent. So we knew we wanted to produce products that were consistent, that was repeatable, and very clean. And so early on, I think in 2015, I don't think DOH had come out with their rules yet, but when they did, we were pretty quick to jump on those rules, even though it was an additional cost for us. We wanted to make sure that people had confidence in the products that we produce and products that they're consuming. That was really the premise behind going DOH and staying DOH. It was worth the extra cost to us. And I do think it's interesting that, to me, cannabis is in a sense setting a standard that no other industry is really doing. Every time I'm in a grocery store and I'm buying something that's organic, I'm thinking, it's interesting that we produce COAs, certificate of analysis, for each one of our products showing that it's pesticide free. And I think people assume that even organic is pesticide free, and it's not. But, you know, when's the last time any of us have walked into a grocery store and asked for COAs for the produce that we're eating? And so, you know, all of it is wellness based. I mean, food is a huge part of our health. In fact, I would say the majority of it is based on, you know, what we consume. And but yet cannabis is, you know, I think we're setting a different standard than other industries.
Absolutely, and like you said, there's a whole lot of trust that goes on in a produce market, right, or at the grocery store, and those, once again, students of ours will recognize that hemp and cannabis, one and the same, is a great plant for soil remediation. So the plant is fantastic at pulling things like heavy metals out of the soil. It cleans the soil, but the problem with that is if you get dirty soil, if you get dirty inputs, then the plant is going to be sucking all that stuff into the plant, and that's what you're consuming. So budget weed is not a budget when you think about long term, right? And it's so tempting to go into a store and say, hey, and I recognize some people are on a budget and that's restrictive, but if you go in and just say, hey, give me the cheapest thing, long term, it might not be the cheapest thing. Just like, well,
just like buying organic.
It's worth it to buy quality. How challenging, and question to either one of you, you mentioned tinctures as a modality. A lot of people before the cannabis industry didn't have experience with tincture. Like, I will say it's grandma medicine, and I say that respectfully to all grandmas, because our grandmothers, our great grandmothers are probably more familiar with that. It has a long herbal medicine history, but some of us, especially younger users, might have never used a tincture. So how big of a hurdle for you all was that, just to teach people, hey, this is what it is, this is how you use it, this is why you should consider doing this rather than consuming some other way?
It's been a huge challenge, but it's also one of many challenges that we face. I mean, when we first came out with tinctures, people didn't even couldn't even pronounce tincture. And so it was an education about the efficacy and how it absorbs into your system that we had to train on. And I would say that was our introduction to education, because our products have never been an easy product to sell. And, you know, I know we have Nikki on here, who's a bud tender. It's been something that we've really had to spend a lot of time educating bud tenders on. And what we found is that when somebody is not comfortable on how to sell a product, sometimes they won't sell it because they don't want to be asked questions that they don't know the answers to. And when you have products like ours that have many ingredients to it, and cannabis is only one ingredient, and in some cases, and in a lot of cases actually, it's not the main ingredient that we use. We use other herbal medicines, whether it's from that Ayurvedic formulation or Chinese herbal medicine. And so there's a lot to it. And so we found early on that we had to spend extra time trying to educate bud tenders, and there's a high turnover in retail stores. So, I mean, we could go there, you know, once a month, and every time we see new people in the store. So we had to figure out ways that we could help educate people, not only on what is a tincture, or, you know, I mean, we also make products like suppositories. I mean, that's not an easy, you know, sometimes people are uncomfortable talking about suppositories, which are very common in other countries, you know, as a way to consume medicine, and very efficient. So we have products like suppositories and also inhalers that we have that we were actually able to partner with a pharmaceutical company who really didn't want to do business with cannabis. So we've always been faced with that challenge to figure out how to educate. And then also, so that's really, you know, we wanted to find ways to reach bud tenders. And so one of the things that we did is we created the Bud Tender Empowerment Program. And that is a program that is 15 online courses. Actually, it's videos. And we made it so that we put it on a third-party platform so that bud tenders or other people if they wanted to educate themselves, not only on our products, on Fairwinds products, but cannabis science as well, they could do it at their own pace. And each video is less than 10 minutes and very educational at the end. We have a somewhat challenging test at the end. But it's been a constant challenge for us. But it's also it's exciting to be able to help educate consumers and people in the industry about cannabinoids and terpenes and cannabis. There's always new stuff coming out about cannabis.
Boy, that answer, yeah, oh, absolutely, and that answer was really rich. So I'm going to go two ways with it. I want to follow up. One, thank you for talking about efficiency, because some people they will go seeking a bargain in the store and don't realize that sometimes the best bargain is choosing the right modality, so you actually get the most cannabinoids in your system, and don't realize that a large percentage of what you smoke is lost in carbon, right? It's lost in smoke. And so where a tincture, you give your body so much more opportunity to absorb the medicine of the product. How about suppositories and I'm glad you said that, because you kind of read my mind. I was going to ask you, because we often talk to bud tenders about suppositories and lube, right? Those are two modalities that people are like, I don't know, it makes me giggle, it makes me nervous, I don't bring it up unless they do, kind of thing. So how would you all recommend bud tenders ask people to consider suppositories, or when to consider suppositories?
Yeah, I think another an aspect to that, and an aspect to this whole subject, is that the different modality that you choose not only affects the efficiency of the absorption, but the location of it stays localized to some degree. So you do get systemic absorption through suppositories and sublingual, just like inhalation. But all three of those modalities they're really concentrated in different areas. Inhalation is going to concentrate in the central nervous system in your brain. Sublingual is going to concentrate more in the blood, the circulatory system, and suppositories will concentrate more in the lower abdomen area, actually the place where it's applied, the large intestine. So I'd say, to answer your question, it's related to what the customer is looking for. If the customer has Crohn's or colitis, ulcerative colitis, or what's the IBS or endometriosis, or anything, or lower back pain, anything in that lower area where you want cannabinoids acting there. Because in our experience, while we were testing the product, we noticed that the THC that's in the suppository doesn't affect you like inhaled 10 milligrams THC, but you definitely notice the THC is just kind of like in a different place. It's not in your head, it's in your pelvis.
Do you want to talk about it not going through your digestive tract?
I was going to ask, that first pass through the liver doesn't happen, right? Because you're bypassing the liver.
Yep, first pass metabolism. So yeah, you're doing that. But no one seems to understand this. I've talked to doctors about this. I don't think that it's well understood why. So we did some tests with larger amounts of THC in a suppository, like 100 milligrams of THC in one suppository, and it does not have the psychoactive effect that you would expect. But it clearly has an effect in muscle relaxation and pain relief. So it is bypassing first pass, but that's not to imply that it's just all going to your brain in a more efficient way than inhaled, because inhaled is also bypassing first pass metabolism, so is sublingual, but they are going to a different place. I think the big effect of the liver metabolism is that you're producing the 11-hydroxy THC, which then passes on and does its work, goes to the brain or wherever. And that's a different molecule. It's a different cannabinoid, and it feels different. That's why when you eat an edible versus when you take a dab or something, it's going to feel different. So does that cover that?
Absolutely, yeah. I just think it's worthy of some conversation. And if, once again, like Wendy said, if somebody's not comfortable or they don't know enough to talk about it, they won't go into that territory. And it's a shame that a product ever sits on a shelf and even ages out because somebody was afraid to talk about it or wasn't willing to go there. So that's critical information. How about, well, actually, let me turn to the room because I've been taking you all's time and see what questions other people might have. And if not, I got more. So, students, friends, allies in the room, what questions do you have?
Well, it's not so much a question as a comment. And so back in January this year, I was diagnosed with stage 2 prostate cancer. And so I was actually taking some vape. It's called CB Jesus from Halo, but also was using some RSO from Skagit Organics. And one of the people there was saying that they would help me out. And she mentioned using the suppository. And so I haven't used one, and I did do a PSA test and came back like negative or 0. So they cured my cancer, but I used both radiation therapy and some hormone therapy, and I was using cannabis at the same time. So a combination of all three, I think, really helped me out. But I do want to experiment more on the suppositories. And so great for bringing it up.
Yeah, I highly recommend them for your situation. My dad was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and it's been in remission for 10 years. So it's certainly a treatable condition, but I think cannabis is a great amendment to whatever you're doing.
You know, one thing that's really interesting about it, we have 2 suppositories, one called Feminine Relief and the other called Rectify, which we got a lot of jokes about the Rectify. But you know, one thing that was interesting, we have a lot of communication with patients, and the majority of patients who were using Rectify were using it for prostate cancer. And there'd be a few that would actually come by our facility and that would share their lab results with, you know, from their doctor. And not only did they find Rectify to be so much more efficient and effective, but also it's funny because there were some other symptoms that came from using Rectify. Like one gentleman said, you know, it's interesting because when I would go golfing, now all of a sudden I could, you know, walk 9 holes without having my knees feeling sore. So it was definitely regionalized in terms of helping with other aspects besides prostate cancer. And it really was helping with pain regionally in that area. So it was kind of a by result of using that product, but the majority of people who use it were using it for prostate cancer.
And one thing I'll add is that the Rectify formula contains other herbs in there that sort of enhance the effect of cannabis that we're looking for, like anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory. One ingredient in particular is called boswellia, also known as frankincense. And this is not frankincense essential oil, this is frankincense resin, which contains boswellic acids. Boswellic acids are resinous, sort of like cannabinoids, but they're ancient. I mean, that's, you know, the 3 wise men in the Bible, that was one of the gifts, was frankincense. So it's well known as an anti-inflammatory pain reliever. And it's another sort of sacrament like cannabis. So the formula contains that and a couple other anti-inflammatory medicinal type ingredients that sort of round it out.
And I'm glad we got into that because we're frequently talking when we have Dr. Giles on here or Dr. Lynch on here about treating both inside out, where you might treat internally with cannabinoids as well as with a topical, but treating locally, right? So if you're something for your digestive system, you want those cannabinoids to go to your stomach, to your upper intestine, lower intestine, something shoulders up, especially. Anyway, making sure that you deliver those cannabinoids as locally as you're able to. So I'm glad we got into that. I want to turn. Madison's got a question as well.
Yeah, so a couple questions, but I guess like the main one is with all the products that are out here, like the suppositories, the patches, there's even like nasal sprays. Is there any new products that we like? I'm sure there is, but like, do you think there's any new products that we can come up with that we haven't already kind of come up with or thought about? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'll just say this briefly. So we're always in R&D, and some of the products, and actually this one we actually did get approved. We're still in a little bit of R&D with it, but we named it No Sweat because we had to be able to explain like what the product does, but it was for menopause, and Max kind of came across it, I would say maybe by accident, because I think you were actually doing some research on arthritis.
Yeah.
And we were testing that product, and he gave it to one of the ladies that worked for us at the time, and she's like, well, it didn't help with my arthritis, which she had in her elbow. She goes, but it's really interesting because I didn't have any night sweats. And so Max said, oh, that's really interesting. Here, take it again. Took it again, no night sweats. And she had severe sweating. And so anyway, started expanding the audience of who we were testing it with. And at one point we had like 100% success rate with the people that we were giving it to. And so I would say, yeah, before we put something out, we want to make sure that it's doing what it says it's going to do. And so, but we are always in R&D with products.
Yeah, and I think that we could expect many, I mean, it depends on what the consumers want, of course, but I think we could reasonably expect many new types of products. The reason for that is that I think the real best use of cannabis is as a catalyst. So it's enhancing the effect of other ingredients, and there's a pretty wide variety of different needs and uses for different types of medicine out there. So there's remedies for arthritis, there's remedies for sore throat, there's remedies for cough, there's remedies for skin itching, there's remedies for hair loss. It just the list is almost endless. So and not only is cannabis good at doing treating a lot of those things on its own, but it enhances the effect of other things. So you could really just make any formula that, for treating anything, put cannabis into it, and it's going to make it work a little better. So, or a lot better. So, if there's a new need in the market where everyone's like, we want eczema medicine, CBD and eczema, that's what we need, then we'll do it, and it'll be a new product.
Excellent. And with the advances of helping, or people have gotten so much better at making cannabinoids in a water-based or water-soluble medium, I think in the future, we could probably look to the possibility of having infused IV bags for specific conditions. I mean, I know hospitals are not about to adopt that right now, but in time, intravenous use, professional medical intravenous use of cannabinoids are not out of the question. So I think the future is bright for R&D.
And there's hundreds of cannabinoids. I mean, we only really analyze a dozen or so in the labs that test them, but there are over 100, and I don't think we know what they all do. So yeah,
right.
I agree. Future is bright.
And it's a great question, Madison. Thank you. Wendy, let me ask you, this year, Governor Jay Inslee signed a bill to make it law that we talked about earlier, right before we met, that the Cannabis Alliance and other allies helped to make happen. And that's that medical patients in Washington State, if they're in the registry, will be able to are able to now go into a dispensary that sells medically endorsed product and not pay 37% tax on their medicine, which is amazing. Yes. So what do you think? I'm sure you all applaud that because you're one of the few who've been participating in that space. How do you think that might affect our industry here? Do you expect a lot more brands to kind of get on board now, or product offerings to become more broad, or any crystal ball ideas that you have?
Well, I think a couple things. There are a lot of companies who are becoming DOH compliant. There's no real certification for being DOH, but you have certain standards that you have to meet. And I know there's a lot of companies right now who are working to get to meet those standards. So I do think, and I think that's a great thing for the industry. I mean, we were kind of fighting an uphill battle, I feel like, for so many years, where we were trying to explain what DOH is. And we would also put out ads in, news magazines like Northwest Leaf, trying to explain what DOH is. And we didn't get a lot of traction on it. But now that with this bill that passed, it's getting a lot of traction and people are understanding what it is. And so I think that's a great thing for the industry. I think it's an even better thing for patients. I think anytime that we can get an industry together to work towards this, and also being able to save, almost 37% tax is huge. These products are very expensive, especially if you're using them as medicine and you don't get relief from insurance. I think it's important to try and bring these costs down. And so I think it's a great thing for the consumer. And I really feel like in the end, it's the consumer that's going to be winning. They're getting a great clean product, and they're getting it for, almost half the price than what they were paying. So I'm very happy to see that passed. And I'm happy to see more and more of this industry getting on board with providing clean products.
Excellent. Let me ask you, Wendy, you've been doing this for a while. Y'all are right at your 10-year anniversary, right? Or
yeah.
Right about. And so we have a lot of students that either want to do a career change or get into an entry-level job in the industry, really hungry to participate in the cannabis industry, and might have some, they have some assumptions about what that means, right? What does it mean to work in this space? If you're hiring staff, what are the things you're looking for? What are the things you want to make sure that the person understands about what it means to work either in the industry or specifically at Fairwinds?
Well, it's funny because when we interview people, we actually, to tell you the truth, we actually advertise positions sometimes not as a cannabis company. Mm-hmm. So it depends on what your skill set is and what your passion is. So if we're looking for, say, somebody in packaging, we will list the advertisement, and a lot of times we won't say that we're in the cannabis industry. We'll just say we're looking for packagers. But when it comes to positions like working in our lab, sales, sometimes at certain positions in marketing, we have a full marketing staff. We want somebody, first and foremost, who has a passion for cannabis. And most people who want to get in the cannabis industry, it's a strong culture. People do have a passion for cannabis. The other thing I always like to make sure people understand is that this is a normal industry. So, we don't have people who come to work who are stoned. We need everybody to be hardworking and who's able to contribute. So we do sometimes set that standard up front. We like people who are very proactive, who like to do research. Our conversations are very intense around cannabis science. And so I would say we look for people who have a background. We also like people who kind of have I would say anybody wanting to get into the cannabis industry, find your niche that you have your specific passion about. And I think sometimes people think, it's hard to find something. They want to get in the cannabis industry, but they're not quite sure in what aspect. And so to me, I always say the first question I ask people is, what is your passion? What part of this do you love? If it's growing, then we encourage people to study the plant, study certain aspects of it. If it's formulation, it's the same thing. But to me, it all starts with your passion, because as soon as you're passionate about something, it never feels like work, and you're willing to put in the time to do the research to become great. And so that's what we always encourage people is, find what you're passionate about, and then reach out to people who are in the industry. And, if your passion is, in marketing or in formulation, reach out, because a lot of times there could be opportunities for internships. And to me, that's a win-win. If you can get into the industry, learn about how companies do things, and maybe go to work for different companies. Everybody has their own way of running a company, and you know what their passion is for kind of the niche that they're in, whether it's growing or product formulation, IP. So I would say reach out to the companies that you admire and see if there's an opportunity that you could even, you know, do an internship there.
Yeah, I totally agree with the passion statement. And from my perspective, all of the skills that are required to successfully run this business are not cannabis specific skills. They're skills that just apply to business. Like formulation, you know, what I do, that could, you know, I could work for a shampoo company, or, you know, probably 100 different types of companies that use formulation. And so for me, I was just really passionate about herbal medicine and the chemistry behind consumer products. And I also loved cannabis, but they were sort of separate things. But then when I started working with Wendy, it just kind of all merged together and became, you know, something more valuable.
Thank you. And you know what's interesting in talking to both of you is you keep talking about learning, about research, about discovering, about data. So for a 10-year-old company, it doesn't sound like you're resting on your laurels. Could you tell me a little bit about, talk to us a little bit about the importance of education? That's the space that we're in. And I don't think we have to preach to our students at all about the importance of it. But what does it mean to you? What's the importance of education at this point in the industry, or the industry in general?
To me, it's twofold. So it's our education from a company like Fairwinds. We're constantly working with and talking to other groups, because I do believe that we're just really in the infancy stage of cannabis science. And I mean, you know, like I said, just, you know, 8 years ago, nobody was talking about terpenes. And now all of a sudden you hear about it all the time. And so I anticipate that as we continue to move forward as an industry, that and we get more funding, you know, other universities can study cannabis without negative ramifications. We're going to continue to learn more. So for us, it's constantly learning about cannabis, being open to new ideas, working with other companies. Like for a long time, we worked with a local lab here. They were in the cannabis space, and it's molecular testing labs. Well, you know, the main thing that they do isn't cannabis. It was studies for cancer, for genetics, not plant genetics, but human genetics. And so we were really working with them, and our first introduction to them was working on a project that they had, and that is doing cheek swab studies on what strain is the most effective for your endocannabinoid system. And so, you know, I think that there's a lot of projects like that that really nobody's yet talking about publicly. And the rules are very difficult to actually to do those types of studies. They don't allow for it. And it's a conversation that I've had quite a few times with the LCB, that, you know, to allow us to become leaders in this industry in Washington State. But right now, the rules don't allow for us to do that kind of testing, and certainly not with non-502 companies. So, you know, I'm hoping that as laws change, that so will our education, and we'll be able to do a lot more research. Let's see, what was the other thing I was going to say on? The other part of that on education would be consumer education, and, you know, people at retail stores who are selling these products and being able to help educate them. And I think finding creative ways to continue to put the information out there for those who are interested, that they can study at their own pace. Everybody learns differently, and so we try to put different types of education out there, whether you're if you learn better by listening or reading, or, you know, a visual learner. I think it's important to hit all different types of mediums. So to me, that's also a very big, I mean, even down to, remember, you know, 7 years ago, everybody wanted high THC numbers. And so we were always trying to educate people on, it's not just about the numbers. There's a lot more that goes into it, and that entourage effect. So there's a lot still to do. I love to see it when people are open to education and learning. It makes us happy. And it's the reason why we put programs out there like the Bud Tender Empowerment Program.
And I just want to recognize and thank you all for being committed to education, because if you're not in Washington State, you don't know that Fairwinds has leave behinds and educational content that are in dispensaries, in addition to the online learning, in addition to what they try to do to educate people about their products and about the endocannabinoid system in general. So appreciate your dedication to this, because like you said, it's a big lift. There's a lot to be learned, and we're never going to be able to rest on our laurels and say, hey, we know it all. We understand everything there is to know about cannabis. We're actually at a great inflection point where there's going to be more information, proven information, coming to us in the coming years than has been available in modern times anyway. So we want to thank you both for taking time. You came in to work on a Saturday to spend some time and to session with us, so we really appreciate you. Thank you for your commitment to the plant. Thank you for your commitment to patients. If you're in Washington State, we really encourage you to look more into Fairwinds when we talk about not just picking the product, but developing a relationship with a brand. This is part of what it is, right? Understanding what's under the hood. What do these people believe in? What are they passionate about? What are they spending their time and money on? And I think you got a good taste today about what's going on behind the scenes at Fairwinds. They're not just putting product on the shelf, but it's so much deeper than that. So thank you very much for your commitment. Thanks for your time today. Our students who've joined us today, please continue to come back. We won't have a Tuesday student lounge this coming Tuesday, but the following we'll have Nurse Olga Hall on. We're not yet announcing our September Saturday sesh host or guest, but we do know in first Saturday in September we're going to have Ashley Anstead on. Ashley is an expert in trauma-informed care, so we're going to talk about the traumatic impacts of the war on drugs that's had on individuals, on families, on communities, and what can we do, especially in the retail space, to communicate with people who've been through that. How can we understand that when we change our communication style a little bit, we can really reach people, hear people, communicate more clearly, and have a better experience. So that's what's up in September. So thank you all for spending your Saturday afternoon with us. We hope you enjoy the sun, and you'll be able to find this recording on YouTube shortly, within a week or so. So thank you all very much, and we hope you have a good rest of your Saturday.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.